In 2020, a men's artistic gymnastics athlete tested positive for a banned substance. He was given a 4-year ban, and following an appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, this was reduced to 2 years. He argued that the Meldonium found in his system, which is commonly used to treat heart diseases and heart problems, was due to contaminated food products. I was very naive about my sport growing up. To me, it was all about respect, work ethic, honesty, and whether or not the best man could win. We all have a different set of motivations in life and an individual set of starting blocks. Cheating has always been a big part of sport, and this is my story. I remember when I was about 14, maybe a little bit younger, watching a TV documentary. It was a BBC documentary, and it was in the lead up to the Beijing Olympic Games. I was excited because it was one of the first things on TV that had gymnastics on it. And I used to obviously scour the TV times. Once I saw there was a gymnastics thing, I was buzzing, and I watched it. And Matthew Pinson had travelled to China, and he'd followed 3 different sports. One of the sports that he followed was gymnastics, and he followed 3 young kids that were training at one of the elite gymnastics centres in China. These kids were like 8, 9 years old. They were leaving their parents for months at a time. They were living in like bunk beds in these dorms and kind of doing a little bit of schoolwork, and they were training like full on, like adults were. And it was a bit of an eye-opener. It was the first time I'd seen anything like this on TV. And these kids, let's say that the coaches weren't shy, even though they were on being filmed and recorded, of getting a little bit physical with these kids. And, you know, I can remember really watching that and being a little bit shocked, and then going back to the gym and talking to the other lads in the gym about it because they'd watched it. And you know, it certainly made me feel like the circumstances that I had in the gym weren't as bad as those guys over there in China. But it made me think, God, what are other people doing, and what are other countries doing all around the world? But I never really thought much more of it because at the time I was only a kid. And about a year later, I saw this for the first time, firsthand, when I travelled out to Ukraine. We went to Kiev for a competition. I went out with Sergey, my training partner at the time, Reese, Dan Keatings, and a guy called Luke Folwell. I was dead young. I was only 14, I think, just turned 14. So we travel out to this competition and do really well in this competition, but we go to a training gym just beforehand. I think I've told this story before, and we're warming up on the floor, and, you know, all of a sudden there's this little boy on the high bar, and he just keeps smacking his feet on the high bar like again and again. He's doing a somersault off it. And obviously the high bar's made out of steel, right? So I'm thinking, God, how is he not crying? And the coach takes him around the corner. All we hear is the tap being turned on and the kid being put under the tap. And I'm like shocked because I've grown up in a nice village in the East Midlands in Kiev, and I'm hearing this little kid that's like 8 years old being put under a tap and drown under this tap. And I'm like looking at Sergey like, Sergey, what is going on? This is not okay. And he's just saying, boys, just carry on training, don't look. This is normal. And I was like, what? This is normal? So that was my first real like eye-opener to, you know, things being very different in different cultures in different parts of the world. And around the same time was when I first started getting drug tested. So I was about 14 or 15. I think it was in the lead up to the Junior European Championships that were taking place in 2008. This was my first big major competition, massive event coming up. And we're in the gym one day towards the end of the preparation process, and like 4 or 5 guys walk into the gym with clipboards. And when you're in the gym, you notice everybody that walks in. You just do, you like eyes. As soon as the door goes, your eyes go to the door. Kind of looking, like thinking, who are these blokes that's just walked in? And he's kind of talking to the technical director at the time. And all of a sudden, coach comes over and says, Sam, you've been selected for drug testing. I'm like, drug testing? What's that? I'm like, what does that mean? And so I start panicking, and I've got to like finish my session. So I finished my session, and basically like, you know, we had about an hour of trainings left, and there's a list. So the drug testers will walk in and have a list of names of all the men or women that are on this training squad, and they'll go, right, I want to test that gymnast. And the coach will say whether he's here or not, or part of the squad, and they'll go, okay, no problem, he's that one. And then they'll follow you for the next hour, and they can't leave your side. So they'll watch you the whole time. So I carry on doing my training. This guy's sat next to me, next to the apparatus, just watching me, making sure I don't run off or hide. And then after the training session, we went into a changing room at the time, me and like 3 or 4 other lads, and you're in there. There's about 5 people in there. You have to fill out some forms. You have to say whether you've been taking any medication. You kind of have, it's one of those forms where there's a front and a back, and you keep the back and they take the front. So you fill this all out, your name, date of birth, all of that stuff, your coach, your doctor, any medication you might have been taking, and then you have to do a urine sample, which is dead weird when you're like 14 or 15. So you go to the toilet, there's a bloke standing behind you, watching you go to the toilet, making sure you're obviously not cheating. It's dead odd. It's a bit weird. And all of these guys are volunteers as well, which I've always found to be quite odd. So you do that, and then sometimes you have a blood test as well. But that didn't really come in until a bit later, because from what I understand, like, blood tests are very expensive, because what they have to do, they have to then race the bloods off to the lab, get them tested, and then they get the results in. So yeah, there's two samples. There's an A and a B sample. It's a weird process. There's all this equipment, and you have kind of like 5 or 6 different options of boxes and things to pick for this process. It's a real thorough process. So they give you options, you pick them, and you have to check that the barcode on every piece of individual equipment that you have to use is exactly the same. This is really important, because you don't want that. You don't want anything to come up. If something does come up, they have to track down all the pieces of equipment, make sure nothing's contaminated. So you do that process, and the first time it was dead weird. And then I got more and more used to it as I got a little bit older. But that was my first introduction to the drug testing process, which, was quite a young age. Kind of like 14 or 15. But I didn't think much of it. My attitude at that time when I was younger, when I was a teenager, God, I just loved my sport, and I thought it was the best thing in the world. From a young age, 7 or 8 years old, you walk in, you shake your coach's hand. The younger gymnasts come in and shake the older gymnast's hand, and come and shake the coaches' hands that aren't even their coaches. And it's all about respect. And, gymnastics is an art form, right? So it's all about trying to do beautiful routines. And I just had it in my head that no one would ever cheat in gymnastics. Like, why would they cheat how could they? I couldn't really understand how you could cheat in gymnastics. At that age, I was like, it's not really too much of an advantage to get really strong, because then you'll struggle on the technical apparatus. So I didn't really understand how you could possibly cheat, and I just didn't think that anybody would do that in gymnastics, because it's all about respect. So that was kind of my attitude for most of my teenage years. And then further on, kind of towards the end of my career, 2019, I went on a training camp in Doha with the GB squad. And a couple of the days, a judge had come out, high-profile judge that represents Great Britain, and now has quite an important role within the men's technical committee for gymnastics. He came and did a little presentation, so showed us some routines from the World Championships the year before, and it was mainly about the new rules in the code, how the judges were judging routines, and it was great. I found it really useful. I was actually really impressed that we were doing an exercise like this, because it's not very often that you're able to have the opportunity to ask questions to judges and kind of see gymnastics through their lens rather than through a gymnast lens or a coach's lens. I was like, this is a really smart thing we're doing right now. But it was really interesting. One thing he said, he started with a question, and he said, who decides the Olympic champion? So everyone's like kind of sitting there, me being very naive, and thinking gymnastics is all about, the performance. I'm thinking, it's the gymnast, right? It's whether the gymnast does the good routine or not. That's what I'm thinking in my head. I don't say it out loud, because I know he's asking for a reason. He's kind of stumped me. And no one really gets it right. And he goes, the judges. The judges decide who the Olympic champion is. And I sat back and thought about it. And it's such an obvious thing, but I never really gave it that much thought before. And he started to tell us how he actually used an example of an individual that is somebody that has subsequently been banned from the sport for a banned substance. And he said, look at this athlete. Before every routine, when it's the podium training session where you go around and you check the apparatus, he talks to all of the judges. In many ways, he asks them, like, what do you think to my routine? How do you think I could improve it? Where are the deductions? And he was like, what he's actually doing is building a rapport with the judges. So, he's got a relationship with them, and they feel part of his process. I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, that's a bit weird, but it makes a lot of sense, right? I don't think I'm the kind of guy that would probably do that, but I understand that. Like, it's important to get a judge's point of view, and and he would do this. I watched him do it. He would go around all of the judges from all of the different countries, make sure he shook their hands and got to know them and stuff. It was really interesting. And then I flipped back, and straight away when he said that to me, I started to think of situations and things that popped out to me during my career and gymnastics that I watched on TV. And when I think back to 2004, I often talk about Alexei Nemov, a Russian gymnast, did the hardest routine that's ever been done and didn't win the gold medal. He took a big step on his dismount, so the judges could only give him a certain execution score. What's crazy is that the crowd booed for so long that they actually changed their scores, which is bonkers. They can't change their scores. That's crazy. They gave him an execution score. They can't change that execution score now because everybody's booing. And, the FIG, the Federation of International Gymnastics, feel embarrassed because it's on TV, broadcasted to the whole world, and the whole crowd are booing because of the score. So they upped his score a little bit. It wasn't enough. He didn't win a gold medal. But that changed gymnastics. And in the same event, even probably more importantly, a Korean gymnast in the all-around final, his difficulty score on the parallel bars was added up incorrectly. So he was only given a 9.9. And in the end, I think he ended up finishing third, but he was actually the legitimate Olympic champion. But because they'd not put an appeal in, the Korean team, early enough, they couldn't really do anything about it. So the guy that came third at the Olympic Games should have been the Olympic champion. Can you imagine that? Imagine actually being the Olympic champion. But because the judges added up the difficulty wrong and you didn't get your appeal in on time, you're not the Olympic champion. That's crazy. So I started to think about these situations, and I remembered back to my debut when I was 18. So I competed in Berlin at the European Championships. Big arena, made the high bar final. This new kid on the scene, 15,000 people watching. I can remember I've never been as nervous in my life, shaking. They were playing We Will Rock You in the crowd, and all the German crowd were stamping their feet, and the arena was shaking. And I went out there and I did a great routine. I just did a leg split. I split my legs just on one of my elements, my squat half. But other than that, it was pretty much perfect. In fact, I actually stuck a dismount with my legs together. I've never done that before, or never done it since either. I can remember Lewis saying, "How on earth did you stick that with your legs together?" I was like, "I don't know, I just did it." And then in that competition, what was really interesting was we're obviously in Germany. And after the competition, you have a banquet. So after a big gymnastics major championships, you have a big celebration, basically. Tables are all spread out in a big kind of like conference centre. All the teams sit at different tables of all the countries, of everybody there. You have a big party, basically. It's a bit odd. And there are some awards given out and certain things. And one of the judges came up to me, same judge actually that had this conversation with us in 2019 about who decides who wins a competition. And he said, "Sam, you should have won a medal there. Yeah, you got robbed. I don't know how they didn't give you a medal." Because I finished fourth, just outside the medals. And up until that point, I was buzzing. I was, I'm 18, my first ever major championships. I'm fourth in Europe. That's amazing. I'm competing against world medalists, European medalists, Olympic medalists. And then I went back and watched the routine a few weeks and a few months later. And I have no idea how one of the gymnasts that was from the home nation beat me on execution, because it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. And I started to think back and go, actually, I did know that, I'm not that naive. I know that the judges, are in charge, really, and my sport is a subjective sport. So that was a really, really interesting, eye-opening conversation. And I think the biggest experience I probably had of this in my life was in 2012. And it's a story that not a lot of people know, but I competed at the British Championships, right? And, my back's against the wall. There's no way I'm on the Olympic team, but out of nowhere, I have an absolute blinder, get a PB, score nearly 91 points. But in that competition, there was another athlete, a good friend of mine, that had a big mistake on the pommel horse, fell off the pommel horse. And in that competition, I remember going back, and all of those routines were put up on the internet. And I watched the routine. It was a pommel horse routine, and he fell on the pommel horse routine. He'd done his shear to handstand, come down, stopped dead, and had to pick up and start again. And I can remember afterwards, looking at the scores and seeing that he scored a score that was impossible to score, even with a fall. There was no way he could have scored that. But what it meant that he won the competition, became the British champion. And at the time, obviously, the European teams had just been and won a gold medal. They didn't want to change that team. And if I had come and won the British Championships, there's no way you can't send the British champion to the Olympic Games. So, I actually had an opportunity years later when I did my own national judging course to talk to a judge about this. I said, look, it was after the meeting. We'd all been in there, loads of judges. I said, can I chat to you for a few? I just want to ask you something. And I showed him it. I showed him the routine. I said, what do you think? Is this a fall? And he said, yeah, that is a fall. Yeah. I was like, it wasn't given as a fall. He was like, well, I've got no idea. And I was like, you were around that time. Can you remember any conversations about that?" And he said, "No, I can't remember that. But Sam, you've got to know that, in your career, you were just so inconsistent." And I was like, "Hang on a minute, we're just talking about this. Doesn't whether I'm inconsistent or not, you've just got to judge what you see on the time. You can't go in there with any misconception." But anyway, I took it on the chin. He was right. I was incredibly inconsistent. And he said, "Look, we all, most of the time, used to win the warm-up. You would win the warm-up. We'd all be thinking, God, Sam's going to smash it. He's on it today." And it was true. In the warm-up, I would look incredible. And then for some reason, I'd get out onto the competition floor, and a lot of the time, I'd be quite inconsistent. Now, I put a lot of that down to doing quite high-level gymnastics. And most of the time, by the time I put my hand up on a competition day, I was so knackered and I was so injured that most of the time I was struggling to even keep my body in one piece and not be in so much pain rather than focus on actually competing. But, I felt when I got to major championships, I was always pretty consistent by the time I actually got there. Anyway, we had this conversation. I kind of left it. But that was for me, that was a massive experience. I'd really watched something. I was like, this is not right. Like, this person's fell and they've not given him a fall. And that's when I started to realize that things could probably maybe be manipulated a little bit. Now, in 2015, something really interesting happened. And what I've got to say is that I'm well aware that my personal coach, Sergey, became a national coach, right? That's a really unique position to be in. And whilst he was still a national coach, he was still my personal coach. Now, that was never my choice. I never asked for that. And I actually, I'm someone that's been in that position of having someone that was their personal coach be a national coach. And I don't think that should ever happen. I think that all the national coaches should be completely impartial. But that happened. It was way out of my control. I was a kid when he first became a national coach, and that situation was allowed to unfold. But it meant that I was privy to a lot of conversations that I probably shouldn't have heard. I'd sit in a car and we'd be on the way to the national centre because Sergey would give me lifts there with my teammate Reece Pearson, and coaches would ring up and I'd listen to the conversations because Sergey doesn't know how to use his phone, so it'd come on the hands-free and we'd just sit there quiet listening to these conversations we definitely shouldn't hear, and it'd be, coaches telling Sergey about these amazing things their gymnasts are doing and what scores they've got in control comps, and we'd kind of be looking at each other like, this is weird. Like, why are they making this stuff up? This is a bit odd. But I would hear these conversations, and because I was in the gym and he was a national coach, the national coaches would ring him and I'd listen to his conversations, and it wasn't okay. But again, it was not down to me. I would hear conversations to do with selections, to do with competitions, and I shouldn't have been hearing that. And I did my very best to avoid that because I never wanted to be compromised by any of that. But naturally it happened, And in 2015, I remember there was the British Championships, and I had just come back from my ankle injury, right? And I'd raced back. I was getting back way too quick, but I was still trying to up my game and do higher difficulty of gymnastics than I was doing even before my injury. So I was putting Cassina in on high bar. It's a straight Kovac with a full twist. I'd caught it at the first competition, the English Championships, but then I got into my next apparatus and injured my ankle again. And there was a couple of weeks before the British, I was really struggling with my ankle, so it just wasn't quite right. Competed Cassina in the all-around competition, put both hands on, missed at the bottom, pung off, so didn't make a final, right? And the morning of the Masters final, the Masters finals are what happens at the British Championships the day after the all-around. So you have your all-around competition and the qualifying, everybody does that, and the next day it's the apparatus finals. So the morning of the Masters final, I get into the gym, technical director comes in and says, "Do you want to do high bar?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Oh, somebody pulled out," because I think I might have been one of the reserves. He said, No, I can get you in the high bar final. I was like, "What do you mean you can get me in the high bar final?" I was like, "That's weird." I was like, "I haven't qualified for it. I fell off." He was like, No, I can get you in if you want to do it. And I was like, in my head, I was like, no, I haven't earned that. I don't want to do it. But in the end, I kind of got overruled by him and my coach, and I ended up doing it. And I did it, and I came close, caught it, pung off at the bottom. I can remember just feeling that was wrong, and I didn't think about it anymore after that. And, a similar thing had happened the year before that, in that I was very lucky. Sometimes in gymnastics, you get given opportunities, right? And you got to take them when you get them. And I got given an opportunity at the end of 2014 when Max had won his world medal all around at the World Championships, and he basically didn't want to do the World Cup circuit. So Max had basically qualified Great Britain a spot for that. And then I got asked, "Sam, do you want to do it?" And I was like, okay, right, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I'm up for that. But again, that was an opportunity that I didn't earn, but I wasn't technically doing anything wrong. Great Britain had been given that spot, and I remember messaging Max and saying, oh, thank you for the opportunity, mate. I really appreciate it. And I said the same to his coach. And I went out there with Dan Purvis. We did the World Cup circuit. And sorry, this was 2013, 2014, Christmas time. I did really well in that circuit. And that kind of really spurred me on into my career then. And I probably reached my highest level a few months after that, leading into the Commonwealth Games. It's where I got my best results. It's where I was doing the highest level of gymnastics I was doing. So if it wasn't for that opportunity, I probably wouldn't have got that chance to kind of get to that level. And I can remember for 6 months, doing incredibly well. Like the highest level of gymnastics I was doing, my fitness was going up. I was strong. I was consistent, getting really consistent. But I can remember it being incredibly tough. Like I can remember thinking, I don't know how long I could sustain this level I'm competing at. Maybe I could do this for 2 years. That's what I had in my head. I was thinking, right, it's 2014 now. We're 2 years out from the Olympic Games. Maybe this is something that I could sustain for 2 years. And then, I go to the Commonwealth Games. I'm in the peak of my powers, as it were. I get the injury that I get and, my world turns upside down. But I remember around that time, probably a little bit earlier, starting to have conversations with my friends and my teammates and saying, there's a few athletes here that I've got no idea how they're competing at this level. Like I've been to that level, and it took me my whole career. It took me 14, 15 years to get to the level that I was at just before I injured my ankle. And I've got no idea how you could sustain that over a long period of time. And they've been doing it now for 2 years. And not only that, they're going out and they're competing 30, 40, 50 times a year. I was like, there's something not right about that. I don't see how that's possible for the level of gymnastics that they're doing. Now, they were doing this because a lot of these athletes would go and do the circuit in Germany. So they compete for a German team. Then they compete for a French team, and they compete for an Italian team, and they all had leagues. So you could easily do another 15 competitions doing this. And then there was the World Cup circuit, the all-around World Cup circuit, and the apparatus World Cup circuit. So they would do all of these competitions. And they go to any competitions where there was any money involved as well. And I found out years later they used to do this because in their home countries, when they won money or prize money in a competition, they didn't take all of it home. A portion of it went to the federation, so the country that they competed for. A portion of it went to their coach, and then they got the remainder, and it wasn't a lot. So the reason they had to do all of these competitions was to try and earn enough money. So that made sense to me. But I still couldn't understand how they were doing it, like how they were physically doing this. And I started to develop this theory that they're taking something. There's no way. They've got to be on something. And it was around the same time, it was a few years after the Lance Armstrong thing had come out, and there was people testing positive all of the time. And I think Meldonium was a word that I learned of in kind of 2016. So I had put my theories to bed because basically a lot of my friends had told me that you're just jealous, and basically they didn't believe me. And of course you can get to that level. If you hadn't got injured at the Commonwealth Games, you would have carried on and you would have stayed at that level. And I was like, right, okay, whatever. And I kind of just then kept quiet and did my thing and tried my best to get back for 2016. Started 2016, in the March time, a Russian athlete tested positive for Meldonium. Now, this athlete that tested positive, he used to represent Ukraine. And he was there actually in London 2012 Olympic Games when Ukraine came fourth, just missed out on a medal. And was on the same team as the athlete that tested positive in 2020. So he comes out, tests positive in the March, and Meldonium basically, it came on the banned substance list in January. So every January, there's a new list of banned substances, and anything can get put on that. So prior to that January, Meldonium was okay to take. There was a lot of high-profile athletes taking it. I think Maria Sharapova was taking it. A lot of Russian athletes were on it. A lot of other athletes as well from lots of different countries around the world were taking this substance. But it had been banned in the January, and it came up in a drug test, I think at a competition he went to compete in Germany in the March time. Anyway, again, argued that it was contaminated food products, and that he hadn't been taking it, and all the Russian Gymnastics Federation came out and said, we stopped taking Meldonium in August of 2015, which coincidentally, Meldonium is supposed to stay in your system potentially can stay in your system for around 6 months, which is about perfectly timed from March when he tested positive. So anyway, it got cleared, and he competed at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, was part of the team, and they won a silver medal at the Olympic Games. So this kind of went on, and that was not heard of. And then in 2020, this high-profile athlete, one of the best gymnasts in the world, comes out that he's tested positive. Big surprise all over the internet in the gymnastics community. Can't believe that this happened. And this was one of the athletes that I was very suspicious of back in 2013, 2014, and I kind of had a wry little smile. And he had tested positive for Meldonium, the drug that's used to treat people with heart conditions. So he tests positive, takes his appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and wins his appeal, and the sentence is reduced by half. So that's that. He's now cleared. He's probably going to compete at the Olympic Games next year, and he's been cleared of it, so he's fine. Obviously, none of his accolades that he had in his career, World Championship medals, Olympic medals, European medals, were taken off him or anything like that. It's really interesting. I go back to 2004 and that Athens Olympic Games, and when that happened and Nemov took that big step, and everybody booed, and they kind of changed the whole rules of gymnastics, changed from that moment, because it was an embarrassment for gymnastics. It was broadcast to the world live on TV at the Olympic Games, and how could this happen? All the crowd are booing for 40 minutes, stopping the competition, and they changed it and got rid of the perfect 10, and they were saving face. That's what was going on right there. Similar thing, I think, now, one of the biggest stars in the whole sport of gymnastics, sentence reduced by 2 years. Never really hear anything of it. No medals were stripped, from what I understand. So it's a similar thing. And I can remember, throughout my career, I was on something called Adams. Adams is where, for 7 years of my life, I had to give an hour slot every single day of where I would be. And a drug tester could turn up and test me. And the rules were that once they knocked on my door, and I used to give the earliest hour in the morning possible. So it was 6 till 7 in the morning was the earliest hour. And I always used to say, I'm in my bed. It'd be 6 till 7 would be the time slot. Knock on my front door really loudly if I don't wake up. And I gave phone numbers to either my parents when I was living with them, Andy, my best mate, when I was living with him, my brother. And I said, call these numbers if you can't get hold of me. Because once they knocked on your door, you had 1 hour to get back. So if you weren't there, if you'd forgot, and let's say you'd gone on a night out and you'd stayed at your mate's house, or you forgot to change it because an appearance had come up, or I was going to do things with sponsors, or I had a gymnastics trip, or spontaneous went on holiday or went away for the weekend, I had to change my 1 hour slot every day of my life for 7 years. It's a massive commitment. And in those 7 years, I only ever missed one drug test where they knocked on my door and I wasn't there and I forgot. Now, after that point, once you've forgotten once, there is a massive emphasis on UK anti-doping coming to have conversations with you, saying how serious it is, reminding you that you're only allowed to miss 3 in a 12-month period. So if you miss 3 drug tests in a 12-month period, you get a ban, right? So I only missed 1 in 7 years, which is really good. I'm pretty amazed that I only did that because I can be quite bad with timing and stuff. So I missed 1 in 7 years. And they used to come and I'd get to know them because they tested me for 7 years, right? And they were dead nice people that would come, and I'd see the drug tester, I'd see the guy that was going to do the urine sample, and I'd check to see if there was a lady that used to come and do my bloods, because I hate needles. I'm so scared of needles. And I'd panic, if they were going to do bloods. And I fainted twice. I fainted when they took my bloods. I'm just really not. I'm scared of needles. I'm not very good at it. So if it was just a urine sample, I'd love it. I'd think, I can relax now. And if it was in the morning, it was great as well, because you normally need the toilet when you're in the morning. But, if they do a drug test after a competition, you might have just been for the toilet, or I'd be so juiced up on adrenaline. Sometimes I've been sat there for, I think at the Olympic Games in London, I was 2.5 hours it took me to go to the toilet to try and get a sample. And it obviously can't be too hydrated, because if it's too hydrated, they can't take a well enough sample. So it's quite a complicated thing. But they would come and I'd chat to them and I'd talk to them about all sorts of stuff. And me being very nosy and inquisitive, I'd say, how do you try and catch like people, mate, from other countries? How do you do that? Because that was UK anti-doping, and their UK anti-doping are on it. You know, I'm on the Adams whereabouts scheme, so an hour of every day of my life I've got to say where I am, but there's no way other countries are doing that, and there's no way other federations are trying to catch their own athletes out. So I'd be like, how do you try and catch athletes from like other countries when they come and like compete here and stuff? And he was like, it's tough, mate. We try and turn up to the airport. So we find out when the flight's going to land, and we'll get there as early as we can to test them as early as we possibly can. But he said it's really difficult, you know. A lot of the time, the people that are cheating are like, their technology is ahead of the people trying to catch them, you know. So it's very, very tough. And they've got drugs that will flush things out of their system. I was like, God, wow. It's like it's a real life game of cat and mouse, you know. Like they're playing this, but the stakes for them are super, super high. And I had that conversation with him. He told me that. And one conversation I really remember was around this time when I started having these theories, was when I had my ankle injury, right? And I'm rehabbing back, and I became quite close with the S&C coach. A great guy. His name was Rudy. He was awesome. And he was from an athletic background. And at the same time, I read an amazing book called The Dirtiest Race in History. And it was about the 1988 100-meter final and how everybody in that final, bar one, but it's quite contentious, subsequently tested positive for banned substances in the years that followed. And it was an amazing book. Like, it blew my mind. If you like sports books, read that book. It's a brilliant book. So I read that book and I was asking him, because I was dead interested in like athletics. I was like, Rudy, why do like athletes cheat? Why do sprinters cheat? And he was like, look, mate, there's lots of different reasons, but physiologically, if you're 18, 19, 20, you might take the risk of taking steroids or a banned substance to try and run a fast time, because once your body has ran at that speed, so once you've ran at 9.9 seconds, it's like muscle memory. You might get banned for 2 years or 4 years, but you still reap the rewards of the sponsorship money and the accolades and, you know, everything that comes with that, the glory. You might get banned for 2 years when you're 20, or 4 years till you're 24, but then you could come back to the sport. And when you come back to the sport, once you've ran at that speed, you can get back to that without the drugs. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, it's like muscle memory. Once your muscles and your bodies felt the speed of 9.9, you can then get back there without the drugs. I was like, oh my God, it like blew my mind. I was like, whoa, this is fascinating. It was an amazing story. It made me think about things a little bit more differently when I see like young people get tested positive for certain things. And look, there are a lot of people that, you know, do take contaminated food products. You've got to be very careful. One thing that I used to do was when I started taking supplements, so if I take protein or maybe creatine or protein bars, I'd always keep the batch code numbers. So I'd make sure that whatever I was taking, and this is really important for any athletes out there, right, that are taking supplements, don't just go to a shop and buy one off the shelf. Make sure that it's tested by Informed Sport. That means that those products have been tested and they're okay for athletes to take. But you still need to write down the batch number of every single bar, protein, or creatine that you ever take, and keep a log of it and write the dates on it. That's what I used to do. I used to keep a notes on my phone. So if you ever get drug tested and something pops up and you know that you've not taken anything and it could be from a contaminated substance, if you have those batch codes, they can go back to the lab, test that original batch and see whether it was from that batch of products that you had. Because in a lot of these companies, the ones that are not so legit, they have big vats inside a factory and you don't know what they've been mixing in there, and they change it all the time. So before they had protein in there, they could have had something else in it. So you've got to be very, very careful. That was like one of the biggest fears I ever had as an athlete, was testing positive for a contaminated substance and everybody thinking I was a drug cheat. Like, because once you've been labelled that, you'll never get rid of it. Like, it stays with you, you know? And there haven't been many of those cases in gymnastics. There have been some cases with female athletes taking like drugs that basically help you keep your weight off, because that could be seen as an advantage. There was, there's interesting cases with drugs that potentially calm you down. So, you know, if you're somebody that gets very nervous, they can calm you down. There's been some interesting stuff with that, but a lot of those people will have a 2UE. A 2UE is a therapeutic use exemption letter. So I was asthmatic, so it meant that for parts of my career, I had a letter that allowed me to take an inhaler, which is a steroid. I never really took it because I actually felt that was cheating. So a lot of people would say, you're ridiculous, you're asthmatic. But I was so scared of anybody saying I was cheating that I wouldn't even use my inhaler because I didn't want to cheat, basically. Because it was drilled into me from a young age by my dad and my family that cheating is the worst thing that you can do. You win by any means except for cheating. So I had that conversation with the S&C coach, but I think to bring this all into summary, right? I think my attitude is that I was very privileged when I was a kid. I was very lucky. I grew up in a nice place, in a lovely village with most of my family around me, in a good house. My parents struggled and they worked really hard, and there was times financially where it was incredibly difficult growing up, and they had to struggle to support my gymnastics career and look after my brother and my sisters. But I always had Christmas presents, I already had birthday presents, I was always in a warm house, but not everybody starts like that. And they're not the same set of circumstances that everybody has. And I've been there to Ukraine and to Russia and to all of these other countries and seen what poverty looks like. And ultimately, if someone comes to you and says, look, you can take this and it will change your life and it will change your family's life. It's quite easy for me to sit here in my nice house, my nice family, nice fireplace. It's nice and warm. I've got food. I've got everything. We're all okay. I can get jobs. There's so many opportunities for me to say I would never do that. But I've never been in those circumstances. So for me, my attitude was always, I can remember when the Icarus documentary came out. That was a big one. If you never watched the Icarus documentary on Netflix, go watch it. That was all to do with Russia basically cheating in the lead up to the Sochi Olympics. And, subsequently they had a ban there in 2020. They couldn't compete. They had to kind of change the name. That had to be the Russian Olympic Committee, I think, something like that. Because they were basically systemically cheating, taking steroids and swapping urine samples when they were doing drug testing. So I watched that documentary around that time. A lot of people going, what do you think, Sam? People cheating in gymnastics? Do you think the Russian team are cheating? And I was like, look, mate, I don't know. But my attitude has always been, if they are cheating and I beat them, that's even better, isn't it? For me, I was like, if I can beat a cheater, imagine how bad that's going to feel for them. That'll be twice as worse. If they know they're cheating and I still beat them and I'm clean, amazing. For me, it wasn't about that, I didn't need to win at those costs, but the costs weren't that high for me. Ultimately, if my career in gymnastics didn't work out, I was going to be okay. I had a lot of opportunities in life, and I had amazing people around me, a good support network. And, in Great Britain, we have funding, UK lottery funding from the government. So if you're doing well, you do okay. I had sponsors. There were lots of opportunities. When I won prize money, I didn't have to give that prize money to British Gymnastics. I didn't have to give that prize money to my coach. I could keep all of it. That's not the same for everybody. So I understand that there's a lot of grey in this topic, and it's complicated. There's rules for a reason, right? And I sometimes say to people now, I think there should maybe be two sports. There should be one sport one Olympics where you can take whatever the hell you want, just cheat. And then one where it's clean. Just have two, because you're never going to stop cheating, man. Whenever there's big things at stake and money at stake, power, glory, you're always going to get that. And it's interesting. I'm going to be interested to obviously watch that athlete potentially compete at Paris next year. It'll be interesting to see whether, athletes test positive again in the future. I think if you were going to cheat in gymnastics, the things that would be the most beneficial are those things that allow you to train longer than other people and recover faster. Ultimately, gymnastics is an arms race. I've said this before. You've got a certain amount of time to learn as much difficulty as you possibly can and learn it faster than your competitors by the time you get to that competition, because we work in 4-year cycles. So the more difficult the gymnastics you can possibly do, the biggest advantage you've got over your rivals. So I think drugs like that would, help the blood flow and the oxygen levels and help you recover are probably the ones that would benefit you the most in gymnastics. I'm sure steroids would probably help as well if you wanted to get super strong. But then, what's that going to do to your long-term health? For me, it'd never be worth that risk. And, like I said, I didn't even take my inhaler because I was so scared of anybody accusing me of cheating. So for me, it just wasn't me. But, it's not just black and white. There's a lot of nuance to it, and it's complicated, and you never know where somebody's starting from. But, super interesting. There's a lot of people probably out there that deserve medals that never won them because people had taken banned substances and bent the rules and cheated. But you never know, right? Every year that banned substance list changes. And next year, they might decide to put creatine on it. And if they put creatine on it, then I'd test positive, you know? So it's an ever-changing layout, but a really interesting topic. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We've got some great guests coming up. Really excited for them. I've enjoyed having a lot of gymnastics-based guests on recently. That's been brilliant. Hear their stories. Also to have a coach on in the last episode and hear the perspective of a coach. I hope to do a bit more of that in the future. But thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe. And yeah, wherever you watch the podcast, listen to it, download it. We really appreciate your support. And thank you very much. We'll see you in the next episode.